Sal Gilbertie is the third-generation proprietor of Gilbertie's Organics, located in Westport and Easton. Established in 1922 by Sal's grandfather, Antonio, Gilbertie's Organics is the largest herb grower and supplier in the United States. Sal's been at the forefront of the organic gardening movement for more than 50 years. He's the author of 8 books, received dozens of awards and salutations, including 2011 Connecticut Organic Farmer of the Year and a 2022 Horticulture Commendation from the Garden Club of America. More than 90% of all family-owned businesses never make it to the third generation. Gilbertie's Herbs and Garden Center in Westport is on its 4th. 101 years. They're in their 2nd century. They've been Westport icons since Warren Harding was president, and no one is more closely associated with the business than Sal Gilbertie. So, Sal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
Sure. Okay, you weren't there in the beginning in 1922, but you were close. Can you give me the brief history of Gilbertie's, how it started and,
Sure.
and how it grew?
From what I know, anyway, my grandfather Antonio came to here in the United States in 1901. Now, as a story goes, which has never been verified, supposedly he came at the age of 17 in the 1880s to visit his uncle who lived in Brooklyn, who took him up on the New Haven Railroad to Westport, and supposedly he fell in love with Campo Beach. Whether that's whether that's legitimate or not, I don't know. And then he came back in 1901 with a pregnant wife and 3 children and a couple of brothers, and they all came to work for the Philo Flower Company on Clinton Avenue. And they must have known about it, because they were basically gardeners or farmers in Italy, and so they must have known about this. And I know Philo had he employed a lot of people, mostly Irish, English, and Italian immigrants, and they were cut flower growers, and they grew roses and carnations and things of that sort because there was no air freight. So if you were shipping to New York market, you had to be within a 30-mile radius. So they would put the cut flowers from Philo and ship them on the train into the city. And there were a lot of cut flower growers in Fairfield County. Trenley's in Darien was a huge rose company. They grew roses, they grew stephanotis, gardenias, things that you would never think of in the Northeast, And so my grandfather worked for Philo with his brothers, and they lived on Clinton Avenue, right there on Clinton Avenue. In fact, one house on Clinton Avenue, I think, is still in the Gilbertie family. And then in 1919, he bought the property on Sylvan Lane, and he began to build used greenhouses. And then in 1922, he made this. I think it was 56 years old. At the age of 56, he went into business for himself. But he was smart enough not to grow what Philo was growing. So he was growing things like ranunculus, anemones, freesia, Gerber daisies, Dianthus beatrix, things like that Philo wasn't growing. Then he got involved with a Dutchman named Doornbosch. And Mr. Doornbosch taught him how to pre-cool iris, daffodils, and tulips. And that pre-cooling process forces them to flower earlier. So he was the only grower in the Northeast shipping iris, daffodils, and tulips into the New York market in January. Nobody was doing that. January and February. They come naturally, come in March and April, And so he made a lot of money. He really did. And during that period, we found some tickets in the basement from 1938 for Wedgwood iris, and where he got more money wholesale then than they're getting today. Can you believe that? So he made a lot of money, and then he bought the Norwalk greenhouses on Isaac Street in Norwalk as the business grew, and he built a few more greenhouses. But Norwalk greenhouses was about 1 acre of greenhouses, and they had gone bankrupt, and the Merchants Bank in Norwalk gave it to him for 1 year for free. I don't think banks do that anymore. But anyway, he then took it over after that, and then they ran that for many years. And then he did very, very well during World War II, because in those days there weren't garden centers as we know them today. So if you wanted to get your seedlings for your gardens, because um, um, Eleanor Roosevelt was the one who started Victory Gardens.
People had to grow their own.
Yeah, so they growing their own stuff, and they had big gardens in those days. 6,000 square feet, or more, and so that took up a lot of room. And they used to sell these seedlings in a little tray that a fellow who lived on Saugatuck Shores. His name was Mr. Peterson. He was a carpenter. In those days, Saugatuck Shores was not what it is today, and he used to build these trays that were 12 inches by 24 inches and 4 inches deep out of cedar, and they would fill them with soil and then plant 12 by 9. 108 plants. So you got 108 plants of the same product, John Deere tomatoes or whatever it might be, peppers or eggplants. And so the gardens were pretty big in those days, and they did very, very well during that time. And then after World War II, air freight came in. And when air freight came in, pretty much all of the Northeast growers of cut flowers went away quickly. And some of them just closed up completely, and then some of them diversified. And so my grandfather, at that time it was my father, and my uncles, they diversified into potted plants. So they were growing, the cyclamen and the poinsettias for Christmas, and the calendula's, and then calceolarias and cineraras and azaleas and the bulb flowers for the holidays, for Easter and Mother's Day. And then they started growing the ornamentals, the geraniums and the petunias and the impatiens and things of that sort. And so they were doing pretty well, but they had a lot of greenhouse space. And so we were very, very lucky to be here in Westport, Connecticut, because the Gold Coast there along Greens Farms Road, there were a lot of large estates that couldn't grow all of their own needs. And so usually the superintendent of those estates would come to my father and say, well, this is what we need for next year. And so they would grow those things, 200 enchantress geraniums or 500 white magic petunias in 4-inch pots or whatever it might be. So they were very fortunate to be in this location, So then the von Langendorf estate, which is right across.
That's the Barons.
The Baron, Baroness and Baron von Langendorf. They own a perfume company. They made White Shoulders and Golden Shadows and the Baroness perfumes, which were very popular. And I still remember I was like 16, 17 years old, and my father, I would have to deliver, and they were a really good customer. And I would be delivering. Every time you went there, you rang the doorbell, and then someone would come to get the flowers. And they always gave me a bottle of White Shoulders perfume that I brought back. And the funny thing about this, Dan, is that, for my mom, my mom got all these White Shoulder perfume bottles. And when my mom passed away, and when my brother took over the house and restored it, he found in a closet a whole bunch of these White Shoulder perfumes, But they were pretty eccentric. They didn't have any living relatives, but they had a lot of money, obviously. And she wanted to have a large formal herb garden in 1957, I think it was. And so it was a big circular 60-foot diameter, I remember that. And it was pie-shaped, and it was 12 slices to the pie. And each slice could accommodate 60 plants. And so she wanted 12 herb plants, parsley, sage, tarragon, rosemary, and things of that sort, oregano. So my dad, being a conservative grower, he put in 100 pots of each, And so we made our delivery in the spring of '58. We had these plants left over of 40 of each variety. And we had a little garden center at that time in Westport, and also one in Norwalk at that place. So we put them out there, and they sold. And so I was fresh out of school, and he said, "Quick, learn about herbs," and that's how I got started in the herb business.
Wow.
So you see, I mean, all the fact that we're 100 years old didn't happen because of us. The good Lord upstairs
Well, you
kept
were,
sending us the right people, you know.
but you were, Philo's not around anymore, and
Yeah,
all these
that's,
places are not Parcells.
Yeah,
They're not around,
yeah.
but you are.
But we've been very, very lucky, and the right people came along at the right time, and the good Lord was been blessing us,
Well,
constantly, and that's how it keeps going.
good things happen to good people.
Yeah, well, I hope so. So we try to be good.
But you yourself, I mean, everybody's talking about organic stuff now, and you've been an organic grower for 50 years. Is that right?
And I'll tell you how that happened. My father was a cut flower grower. They sprayed with everything. And they used to be spraying, eating a sandwich, and smoking a cigarette at the same time. No cover, just that was the way it was. When we started growing the herbs, and the story about the herbs is basically, when my father passed on, and I started growing them, and I was really such a novice at it. I was just, searching for straws because I didn't really know much about it. But we were very lucky. Here comes another person. Here's this Edna Cashmore, Mrs. Percy Cashmore, who lived in Weston, and she had the prestigious distinction of being the president of the Herb Society of America between 1958 and 1964. And she sort of took me under her wing, and she would say, "Sal, these are the herbs you should raise for this year." So it was, I would send away for herbs on these different catalogs or in the back of magazines, and sometimes I'd get things that looked exactly alike, but were quite different, or they looked different and they were marked the same. So it was very confusing, especially with thymes and oreganos and things of that sort. So she would say, "Don't worry, Mrs. So-and-so from Chicago did her thesis on thymes at Cornell when she was there, and she knows all about thymes. And when she comes to our board meeting in June, she'll straighten you out." And that's the way it happened. And so not only did I have the networking, but also the identification, learned the identification and everything else that went with it. And so I was very, very lucky to have her, because without Mrs. Cashmore, it wouldn't have happened either. So we just kept growing and growing herbs, and we're in Westport. People were starting to travel to Europe. They were seeing herbs being used in Europe and all over. And so we had a customer base, And I remember in 1969, I had 69 different varieties of herbs. I was very, very proud of that. In fact, I think we did an ad in the Westport paper, 1969. And simultaneously, Mr. Leahy up at the Danbury State Fair, he was having his 100th anniversary. And then along with that, the rock group Simon and Garfunkel came out with the song Scarborough Fair, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Yep. So I saw dollar signs because I figured I could raise enough parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme and bring them up to the Danbury Fair and start making some big money. So I went to see Mr. Leahy. He was a wonderful old gentleman. And he said to me, "Sal, this year, 700,000 people will come to my fair." Then I really saw dollar signs, because I said I could easily sell one plant to every 10th person to come in, So I grew 70,000 pots of parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, and sweet marjoram for the fragrance. And we took a large circular booth at the Danbury Fair. We won a prize. It was the best booth in the fair. But the thing was that the booth could only hold 3,500 plants. So I figured if I'm going to sell 70,000 plants, I have to replace that, twice a day, or once a day, or the next day, the next morning. So I cleared with security, and I rented some trucks, and I got some firemen who would do that for me. And so they would zoom the trucks up, unload the plants, take back the money. It was a great plan, And I remember the first day like it was yesterday, because they asked the vendors to show up at the fair at 6 a.m. And we got there. Here was this giant truck at the gate, and they were unloading apples and cider. And I said, what a great place to be, at the gate, because as you're coming out, you can buy the apples and cider. And that's really the whole story, because Mr. Leahy's projection was accurate. There was 710,000 people came to the Great Danbury Fair in 1969. And of the 710,000 people, 412 saw fit to buy an herb plant, because they got a beer in one hand, a hot dog in the other hand, a sweater over their arm. They can't carry anything, So I've been seeing somebody ever since.
But the organic part of it.
Well, with the organic part, yes. I'm sorry, I jumped to the Danbury Fair.
No.
I recognize the fact that we had these herbs out in that area. In fact, it's not much change from where we started having them in number 5 greenhouse there, where we display the herbs every year. And I noticed people were just picking them off and tasting them, sort of like having their lunch at Gilbertie's. And I said, I can't do this. I can't use these sprays. So I started really researching in the organics. I think I was like the first person in the Northeast that began to bring in beneficial insects. And there was a fellow in Boulder, Colorado, who from Holland, who was importing the beneficial insects from Holland and selling them. His name was Richard Gerhardt, really great guy. And he said to me, I always remember what he said to me. He said, Sal, remember, the beneficial insects will keep your house clean, but they won't clean your house. So in other words, you can't bring them in after you have an infestation. You have to bring them in ahead of time, so that, and so I started doing that, and that was the major thing that I did. And the second thing was I started looking into the sprays and what they were, and I recognized the fact of how bad some of those things were, especially the fungicides. And so we went to those things that were botanical sprays. And so we used the botanical sprays. And the big thing about organic, you got to pay more attention. You don't, if you're growing commercially and, you got an infestation, okay, spray it. You have a nutrition problem, you just beat it with, triple 20 or something, or Miracle Grow. So you have to pay more attention. And to me, that made it more fun. You know what I mean? Because you can't blink, know? And so I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed doing what I did. And, when we went to school here, everybody had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Everybody. I mean, that's what they served in the luncheon. Nobody was allergic to peanuts. They're not allergic to peanuts. These kids are allergic to the fungicides they're using on the peanuts. See? And the peanuts are rhizomes, and they suck up everything in the soil. And that's where the problems are. With a lot of problems, I think, that we have today, it's the dangerous chemicals they're using, the fungicides, the herbicides, the insecticides. I mean, they're using herbicides that kill everything but that particular product they're growing. So an herbicide kills everything except for garlic, or an herbicide that kills everything except for peanuts. It's in the soil. It's going to get sucked up. That's why you should never, never buy anything but organic root crops. Your beets, your potatoes, your onions, your garlic, carrots, those should be organic, because it's all bad stuff. It's all bad stuff.
So you've really, have you been able to educate people? Do people?
Oh, I think so. And I think people understand now. Unfortunately, the regulations that were in place for certified organic were at a state level. So every state had its own little system, and depending upon who was running it, And so until I think it was 2001, when the federal government had federal regulations, and then it made a lot of sense, And so then we became certified organic through the government.
8 books.
Yes, that was because of another friend. I mean, of another person that the good Lord sends into our life, and that was Larry Sheehan. I used to give lectures to garden clubs, and usually there's all females, once in a while a guy. But all of a sudden, this guy was showing up in the back of every place I went, whether it was to be in Darien or whether it was here in Westport or in Fairfield or anything. And here's this guy in the back, and I said, "What the hell is this guy?" And finally, one day, he comes up and he said, he introduced himself. He said, "How would you like to write a book?" I said, "I don't know how to write a book." So he said, so we had lunch at the Old Arrow restaurant. I never forget it. And I said, "I don't know how to do." He said, "I'll do it. I'll tell you how to do it. You just got to tell me everything, and then we'll do it together." And we became such wonderful friends. Unfortunately, Larry just passed away this past October. But he lived in Nashville, Massachusetts, but I made many trips up there. And he was always such a generous, good soul, wonderful soul. And we had so much fun together. It was wonderful. So he's the one who talked me into writing books with him. And the first one we did was vegetable gardening at its best. And that was pretty good. And then we did herb gardening at its best. And then we did another one and another one, another one. So we did 7 books altogether.
Wow.
But it was all because of Larry. I mean, it was wonderful. So.
And do you find people who know you through your books?
Some, yeah. I mean, none of us, I remember the first book I wrote, I was signing books at Klein's in Westport. Do you remember Klein's in Westport? Sure. Yeah. And so a fellow came up to me, he said, "So you wrote a book. Everybody thinks you're rich now, right?" I said, "I don't know." So he said, "Well, when I was a young man, I wrote a book, and then I figured it out. You have to write a book every 10 days to make a living." He's probably right. Yeah. You don't make a lot of money on books. No. But it did great for, promoting Gilbertie's, promoting the, organic, promoting not only the use of herbs, but also the goodness of herbs and how to plant and use herbs. And so it was good. And then, and Martha Stewart came along, and she really promoted herbs, I think, more than anyone else that I know anyway.
You were on her TV show.
Yeah, a couple times. Yeah, we had a couple fun times together. Yeah.
Wow. So you love what you do. It's clear, the passion.
You have to.
What do you
so
love?
Much work.
What do you love about herbs and flowers, especially herbs? Now that you're talking about those,
from the seed. I mean, the miracle that occurs all my life with sowing seeds, and seeing the growth and seeing the goodness coming from the earth. It's so, what a gift.
It never gets old.
I'm going to get emotional.
Yeah, but it never gets old.
No, never gets old. And it's just so wonderful. And the other thing is, the people that come to shop at Gilbertie's, they're all good people. You know what I mean? I remember one time I tried to pay something with a check at some store, and he said, "We don't take checks." I said, "How come we don't take checks?" He said, "Well, if you were in business, you'd understand that." And I didn't answer the guy. I didn't retort him. But I said, "We never had that problem. We never had a bounce check." I mean, the people that come to that are involved with the soil, they're good people.
Has the customer base changed?
Yeah, sure, it's changed. It's a little bit different. I don't come down to the Westport store too often because I get nervous when I see these $800 containers. I said, "Gary, who's going to buy that?" And then, of course, the next day it's gone. But, I was used to, $7.50. These things that are happening here are quite different. And, we've been blessed being here in Westport because the people understand nature. They understand beauty. They understand the goodness of the earth. And I can't say enough.
It's interesting. The new, since the pandemic, there's a ton of new people in town, young. Many of them come from Manhattan and Brooklyn, and I don't think there are a lot of backyard gardens. Not too many in Manhattan, anyway.
No, and there really aren't too many backyard gardens right here. I mean, there are new ones being built. Mostly raised beds. But nobody's doing 6,000 square feet anymore. I mean, those days are gone, except for some of the estates that still have it, But I think that there's a lot of container gardening being done. But I think people enjoy and love plants, and that's the whole ball game,
Sure. So 2 more questions.
Okay.
Favorite herb? Do you have one?
Well, I think I have to say basil, of course, because I'm Italian. But, the basils are so interesting because most of them are Genovese basils, and there's so many different varieties now. And now, there's a little powdery mildew problem that occurs in August when the air is stagnant, and they've developed some new varieties. And Rutgers has developed 4 new varieties that are resistant to that powdery mildew, and they named them for love, basil for love. And so it's passion, obsession, passion, obsession,
lust.
No, not lust. Thunderstruck.
Okay.
And passion, obsession, thunderstruck, devotion, and devotion.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and they're good. They're good varieties, but they're all Genovese varieties now. But then there's lemon scented, there's cinnamon scented. There are some, and there's different colors now. So there's a lot of different basils, and they're all exciting. So you can do so many things with basil. So.
Are you a good cook?
I like to think so. I cook every night. I spoil my wife rotten.
And you got a couple of grandkids?
Yeah,
great grandchildren.
Yeah, I have 2 new great grandsons, both born in March. One born on the 3rd of March, and one born on St. Patrick's Day.
Okay.
So James and Mateo, and
Nice.
they're both adorable. That's you want to hug them and eat them. I mean, I think as you get older, you get to be my age, you start to get a little greedy, not for material things, but greedy for all the good things in life. You want to see more babies laughing. You want to see more daffodils in the ground. You want to see more seeds being planted.
Yeah. Well, speaking of birthdays, when we're taping this, your birthday is tomorrow.
Tomorrow, for some strange reason.
86.
86. Yeah, the good Lord has been good to me. No question about it.
So what's ahead for the next 86 years?
Well, whatever the good Lord wants. I'm just going to keep going. I love doing what I'm doing, as you said, and I'm teaching. I'm teaching some new people that have come into the business with me, which I love because I have one gal, Chimmy, who is a sponge. She sucks up everything I tell her, and it's wonderful. And she's a worker. She's really a worker. And that's the other thing, we're successful because we've had good people working with us. And we've had wonderful customers. That's the only reason why we're successful. And we love what we do, and the people with those who are with us. We have really good people.
I love that you said that they work with you, not for you. That really says something about the business.
Well, they have to, because of the fact that there's a lot to be learned, especially in scheduling, scheduling plants. Being a farmer in the Northeast is not easy. The window is narrower, than it is in the Southwest. And you have the weather to contend with. I mean, they have the weather to contend with all over, obviously, but we have a lot. Here we got these 60-degree temperatures in January, and then it's supposed to be below 0 on Friday. It's kind of woo.
Yeah,
that's not easy to live with. I mean, I am so happy that Lori Cochran Dougal has bought the farmers market to Westport, because there are so many good farmers who work really, really hard that can show what they do and sell and do better because of the farmers market. And Laurie's been another blessing.
Laurie is great, and so are you. So Sal Gilbertie, the owner, the 3rd generation of 4th generation Gilbertie's Herbs and Garden Center in Westport, and Gilbertie's Organics. Thank you for being here, and I sure learned a lot.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.